and Christopher Bishop here at Hallwalls for the premiere of the video documentary by Doug Ruffin, B.U.I.L.D, of the community and for the community. And with me right now, Dr. Monroe Fordham. He is a professor, a history professor at the Buffalo State College, but of course he also was the B.U.I.L.D and is the B.U.I.L.D historian. Your thoughts and impressions on at least the first part of the documentary?
Well, I think this is a monumental achievement because what it does, it captures the history of a very important organization by videotaping and interviewing the people that were involved in it, which is a rare thing to happen. And I think this is, Doug should be commended, and the people that work with him should be commended. This is really a monumental achievement, and it's a great thing for the community of Buffalo.
What do you think that folks can get out of the video besides the historical importance? What are you hoping that people come away with as you are a historian yourself? What do you hope that people come away with from watching this video documentary?
Well, I think people in the community see the continuity between the present and the past, and I think we're not trying to reinvent the wheel every new generation. Generations that come on the present can see what people from the earlier period in the 60s did to try and solve some of the same problems that are still in the community today. And it was just a joy watching some of the people, because in a sense this was a reunion of some of the people that were active in the 60s, and it was a joy for me to watch some of them because I hadn't seen many of them in years. And it was a good thing for generations to touch base with each other and to share their information and to share their goals and ideals on what they want for their community.
Lastly, there are so many keepers of legends, storytellers in African culture and cultures all around the world. Do you see yourself and people like Doug Ruffin who retell these stories and bring different points of view from these stories that have taken part in the past? Do you see a link between those two groups as they tell the stories and live history over again?
Well, I think I feel that we're part of the same kind of tradition, because one of the things that the B.U.I.L.D organization did in the 70s was they asked me to preserve the records of their organization on microfilm, and that's what we did. We preserved all of the records from that were in existence at that time in the organization on microfilm, because their leaders had the foresight to see that what they were doing was important, and that they wanted to make sure that the records and papers from their works would be preserved.
And back here with the B.U.I.L.D documentary preview at Hallwalls, I'm here with Mrs. Donette Ruffin, the mother of Douglas Ruffin, who of course, Doug Ruffin Jr., who put this whole documentary together. First and foremost, I know you're very proud of Doug. Your thoughts on the documentary and all the hard work that he's done?
Well, it's an honor to have a son that has done such a wonderful job. Douglas is a very committed young man, and I'm very pleased that he has decided that he wanted to do this tribute, really, to the black community and to all the organizing efforts of the B.U.I.L.D organization. His father was very active in B.U.I.L.D even before he was born, so this is not only a tribute to him, but also to his dad. As far as the impact that it has, the B.U.I.L.D Academy, which is the part that I guess is closest to home to me because he was a student at B.U.I.L.D Academy, is really the forerunner of what we talk about now as community schools, and I happen to be principal of a community school.
That will be School 53, correct? Okay.
Yes, it would be, and some of the very things that happened at the B.U.I.L.D Academy we see happening again in community schools, and there are community schools, in fact there are 42 of them throughout New York State. So the B.U.I.L.D Academy has been a forerunner of a program for community empowerment in the field of education long before the present situation is what it is now.
Your thoughts and impressions? This is certainly not taking part in a classroom, but your thoughts on the video documentary is sort of a history lesson for what do you hope that that maybe the younger community, the younger generation could get out of this as maybe they come and take part and see parts of this video documentary?
Well, first of all, we're always talking about your roots, and we're always talking about how you evolve and where we've been in the past. And you don't know where you're going, or you can't decide where you're going till you find out where you've been. There is quite a history in Buffalo, and it's nice to be able to see it documented, and especially in the visual way. It's no longer just stories that are passed on from generation to generation. Now we have a visual presentation of that. There are many young people that are actively engaged and want to be actively engaged in community empowerment. For example, the whole organization of Grassroots. They're very active in wanting to get involved in community politics. And it's a learning experience as we teach children in the classroom about being interested in your community, community service, understanding how, looking around you and seeing what your community looked like and seeing what it looked like years ago. So just the documentary itself and taking a look at all the different aspects of it, things that we don't even think about. For example, we talk about the community organizing, but even in looking at the dress, the time, the issues that were of concern at that time, and reflecting on that not only in lessons but also as it was evolving in their own community.
Here's a black guy, pretty much and with me right now, the beautiful Camille Gator. She is, of course, is the wife of the late Bill Gator, and thank you very much for joining us. First and foremost, your thoughts and impressions on Doug Ruffin's video documentary, sort of reliving the story of the B.U.I.L.D. Organization.
I think Doug Ruffin Jr. did just an exceptional job in putting this together. There's so much history. He chronologized it very, very nicely. I think he did an excellent job, and although he made tribute to the Reverend Ford and the Mrs. Bill and Claudia Sims and the Bill Gator, I think he deserves a great amount of praise for this. He did a great job. Great job.
Now, for our viewers who do not know, Mrs. Gator's husband, William Gator, was the president of B.U.I.L.D. from 1968 to 1970 and was very much involved in civil rights and community rights and education and so many purposes in the Buffalo community. Tell our viewers a little bit about your husband, what he stood for and what he was all about, and his ongoing legacy here as far as things are involved in the city of Buffalo.
Well, I guess Bill's greatest strength, and perhaps some people might say his weakness, was his compassion for people and for people's rights. And I think that says it all for Bill. He just had this great love for mankind. And whatever he did in his life, he always did something to try to help mankind. So I guess that would say it all.
What will Bill think of the documentary tonight?
Oh, listen, Bill lived this documentary because he and Doug Ruffin Jr. worked closely. He interviewed Bill many times. I know Bill was just so very, very excited about Doug Jr.'s interest in even doing something like this. I know Bill is very, very pleased, as well as the other honorees tonight.
Bill, of course, went ahead. He lived through this as well, but you lived through this area as well. Your thoughts and impressions on everything that took back as far as B.U.I.L.D. was concerned?
Oh, it just brought back so many memories that you just wish just a tenth of the people today had that kind of motivation and drive to do something to save this city, to save ourselves. It was a great period. I wish it could come back again.
Any specific memory or thought that jumps out at you as far as that whole era that was going on during that time?
No, all all the times were of equal importance. I guess one of the most satisfying things for me personally was when we finally got this city to name Martin Luther King holiday on January 15th, and schools were closed. That was probably the most satisfying for me.
Now we talk about the ongoing legacy of the B.U.I.L.D organization, be it fighting for the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, the B.U.I.L.D Academy, also the Juneteenth festival that the B.U.I.L.D Academy was very involved in. Can you tell me a little bit about the parkway that'll be going up in the Kensington area of the city that'll bear your husband's name? Tell me a little bit about that and how that sort of plays into what he fought for when he was B.U.I.L.D president.
Well, I think it was apropos that they named the parkway William L. Gator Parkway, and I think it was fitting for that neighborhood since Bill spent so much of his time and energy, many times under my objections, to go and do something for people. I think it's a great thing. I think Bill would be honored. His family, me, his 11 children, 24 grandchildren, and 6 great-grandchildren are honored by that parkway. We truly are.
And I'm here with Miriam Beal, who was a member of B.U.I.L.D, a member of the Education Committee as well. Your thoughts and impressions on Doug Ruffin's work tonight?
I think it's tremendous. And I'm so happy to see this because I think that if the present or future community can benefit by what has gone on in the past, then we'll be that much further ahead, because there were a lot of lessons learned that I'm sure that will benefit those who are coming along now. And it's just like I was in Israel a couple of years ago, and I went through the Holocaust Museum, and one thing the Jewish people have said is that they don't want their people to forget. So we don't want our children and our people to forget what we have come through, so that it won't be lost, and then they can build on that. And one thing we've learned, that we don't have economic power, we don't have institutional power, we still don't, but we still have people, and we can still build on and begin and know from whence our power comes, and it's still with our people.
Tell me about the work of the Education Committee with B.U.I.L.D, some two and a half decades ago, and are there any stories or maybe little things that you could share with us, take us back a little bit as to what was going on with the Education Committee, as education was a big part of what B.U.I.L.D was all about?
Yes, well, education, is so important, and with our children, we knew, and from a documentary you can see that what we were getting in schools was not designed for our children to be successful in life. And I remember after all the work that we had done at B.U.I.L.D Academy, the Board of Education did not want to name the school B.U.I.L.D. So we were in the library upstairs, and we had discussed. They wanted to name it by any name other than Bill. So while we were negotiating, we remember that power isn't given, it's taken. So while we were discussing, our people were downstairs nailing up the sign, and everyone agreed it was going to be B.U.I.L.D Academy. So that's when I look at that sign, that's one of the things that comes back to me.
We often talk about a generational gap. Today's generation really not understanding civil rights struggles, other struggles that the past generation had. Can this documentary, this video documentary, sort of serve as a history lesson for this new generation, and maybe sort of retell the story of things that their forefathers had to go through, their ancestors, their family members before them had to go through to make things the way they are for them today?
It certainly is a lesson, and there are lessons to be gained, because we had the benefit of not being, well, we were removed from slavery, but not from some of the tales and some of the experiences of segregation. So many of us who were involved came out of a system where we could feel, whereas the children now, some of them have a problem trying to relate to even Martin Luther King, and the work that went on then. So with the work that Doug Ruffin and Jet Set has done, it can bring back and perhaps give an incentive to this now now generation to see what can be done when people come together and are able to move. And it produces power. And our whole aim back was not just to be social workers, but to build a power organization through the interests of the people. So that, as you see on the documentary, it was to be of the people, by the people, and for the people. And that is can still stand even this 30 years later. So there are lessons to be learned, and this is just a small part of a bigger picture. And so yes, there's a lot to be learned.
With me right now, Leela Bird, who was a B.U.I.L.D member. Tell me your thoughts and impressions first and foremost on Doug's work tonight.
I think it's awesome. That's the word that I hear, and it definitely has risen to its heights. He is a very intelligent young man, and to be able to want to bring this to fruition as a former student of the organization and of the school.
Now, you're a member of the organization. Tell me your thoughts and impressions looking back on the work now and all the work that you did in the past, how it sort of brought fresh here in 1997.
Yes, when I became involved with the B.U.I.L.D organization, it was firstly through the school. And what had happened, my husband and I had discussed where our older daughter was going to be attending school, and I couldn't think of any place I wanted her to go. So he said, well, the B.U.I.L.D organization is going to think about developing a school in the community that will have its own concept and be free from what we see existing at that time. So I attended during the month of August for those 2 weeks of in-service to determine if this is where I wanted our daughters to attend. And at that time, I think my daughter was 4 and the other was 2. And we went every day for the 2 weeks. And with our putting our heads together with all of those who attended, we came up with the concept of what the school should look like. Then my involvement also expanded to the fact that I was president of the personnel committee that was responsible for hiring the teachers. And of course I was forthwith with them and said to them that you feel that you can obtain our goals, fine, but if you don't work out, then we will dismiss you. So that was the stance that we took, and me as president of that. I also sat on the policy board, and before I left the organization, I was vice president of that. So I spent a lot of years, so much of the fact that my children said, well, you're so involved with the school. When we get into Hutch Tech at high school, please, Mommy, don't come every day, don't do this. I said, well, I'm working full time now, so I definitely can't do that.
And Chris Bishop here at Hallwalls once again for the premiere of the video documentary B.U.I.L.D of the community and for the community. And right now, joined by 2 generations of Ruffins, Doug Ruffin Sr. and Doug Ruffin Jr. Doug Ruffin Sr., let me start off with you. Your thoughts and impressions on your son's work, and of course you were a member of B.U.I.L.D. Tell me your thoughts and impressions on his work tonight.
Well, I'm glad he finally got this done. It's something that the community deserves. He got a chance to document the history of an organization that was very vibrant here in Buffalo, that did a lot of great things in Buffalo, and actually, in my opinion, it's an organization that's needed today. And he got a chance to finish it before at least 2 of the principal players died, and I think that was very important.
The 2 members that you speak
right.
of?
Bill Gator and Dick Ford.
Okay. Yeah. So many times tonight we've been told, Doug, the story needs to be told. The story needs to be told. What sort of inspired you to tell the story?
Well, about a couple of years ago, more like 3 years ago, I did a documentary on the Black Panther Party, and then a few days afterwards, my father and John Smith had approached me about possibly doing something about the B.U.I.L.D organization, and at the time, my memories of it were kind of fragmented. So one day when I was up in my attic, I found 2, a B.U.I.L.D convention booklet from 1973 and a Juneteenth booklet from 1976, which was the first Juneteenth, and my memories of that were about the clearest between that and B.U.I.L.D Academy. So once I had a chance to look over that, decided it was something I wanted to go into.
Doug Sr., can you tell me a little bit about the legacy of B.U.I.L.D., whether we talk about Juneteenth, the B.U.I.L.D. Academy itself, and also the lobbying for the King holiday? Can you tell me sort of the legacy, how it still stands today, and how it sort of relates to today's generation?
I think what they were trying to do in those days was trying to show that a community can take control of its own destiny, and it can take care of things that they need to do for themselves. And I think that's something that still rings true today. Education is still important. Community schools are now trying to take off, and I think the B.U.I.L.D. Academy was one of the first community schools that has ever done anything like that. So as long as communities have some say in their own destiny, I think it'll always have a legacy.
Can you do a little bit of a compare and contrast as to the civil rights organizations or organizations that fight for certain causes in the city of Buffalo today, how they exist, sort of a different battle, of course, but can you just do a compare and contrast maybe with B.U.I.L.D. as opposed to what's going on today in the community?
I think you'll see some of that in some of the abortion fighting that's going on and protesting that's going on in the communities. You'll see some of it in some of the other organizations that are around, but I think in those days, in the 60s and 70s, it was more of a protest movement. It was more grassroots level organizations. It was more people who, the hopelessness was there. Here now today it's a little quieter. It's still there. There's still a lot of things that need to be done. You don't see as many people stepping forward today to do it as you did in those days.
Tell me a little bit about your involvement with B.U.I.L.D., all the committees that you were on, and just are there any stories or any events that stand out in your mind? Is there any one that you could key in on specifically? Maybe
actually, not really, because we were there. I spent a lot of my time at the Skills Assessment Center. Which is that was where my love was, and I did also do some of the things with the Education Committee. But I think the thing that probably stands out the most in my mind is that you had a group of people who cared about what was happening in the community, and even though other members of the community weren't standing with them, they had the nerve, or the guts, if you want to call it that, to do what they had to do. And sometimes that made it a very lonely kind of a fight, but it was a very important fight, and I think they paid a dear price to have it done, and that's why I think this documentary is very important for the history of this community.
Okay, and part of that fight, of course, became the B.U.I.L.D. Academy, and a lot of people might not know this. You actually attended the B.U.I.L.D. Academy. Your thoughts and impressions, as to what was going on as far as all the stuff that your dad and B.U.I.L.D. was doing at the time, and B, your thoughts and impressions on going to the B.U.I.L.D. Academy itself.
Well, as far as my thoughts and impressions on a lot of the stuff that they were doing, I have to admittedly tell you my memories of that aren't really that clear because I was extremely young at the time. I was about 4 years old in preschool at the time when I first knew about the B.U.I.L.D. organization. My earliest memory was when, back in 1975, when they were sitting at home with my mother watching my father and Bill Gator and some other people stand outside of the 12th precinct on Genesee Street, and I was wondering if they were going to take my father to jail, basically. And other memories were basically of the first Juneteenth festival, because I remember that was all we ever used to hear around the house at the time.
Now that was on Jefferson Avenue before it moved to Genesee,
yes, it was.
Correct?
Yeah, and I remember those were being very long days. Matter of fact, we were down there from like noon till night a lot of times, running booths, and matter of fact, I think one of them I got lost in. But as far as the B.U.I.L.D. Academy, I was kind of in a unique position for B.U.I.L.D. Academy because the first year I went into B.U.I.L.D. Academy was 1976, right after the first Juneteenth festival. And I was at the Clinton Street location for like 1 year. And then the following year, they moved us over to Fugeron Street, and I can remember driving in the car with my parents, and I noticed that they weren't going in the same direction that the Clinton Street location was. I'm like, where are we going? They drove up to the school like, this is going to school. So I was like, this isn't school. This isn't B.U.I.L.D. Academy. Like, yes, it is. They moved it, so. And rest is history. I was there from like at that location from like 1977 to 1984.
Okay, okay. Lastly, we hear so much about people coming down on Generation X saying that we're not linked to the past, we don't care about the past, this, that, and the other thing. What do you hope that your video documentary series on B.U.I.L.D will do and say, and do you hope that it'll serve as a history lesson maybe for some folks this generation to let them know what went on in the past?
Chris, I think it will. This should serve as a good history lesson for people to look back on all the struggles they fought in the past, and I hope that within the next few showings that a lot of other young people can come out and support this event. Some of them that were here today got a good chance to meet a lot of the B.U.I.L.D members that were there throughout that era. Looking around, it was kind of like one of the old B.U.I.L.D conventions at Skateland almost. It was nice to see everybody see each other again and hug and say, well, I haven't seen you in years. The last time I may have seen something similar to that was fortunately I have to say it was at Bill Gator's funeral. But there were other moments throughout those years that stuff like that would happen, like conventions and particularly at the very first Juneteenth festival.
Okay. Doug Ruffin Sr., hardworking father and proud father, and here on my other side, Doug Ruffin Jr., a proud young man and also a hardworking son. Thank you very much for joining me, both of you.